Alright. This is a unscripted, I have no fucking points I'm going off of, this is just out of my fucking brain, video about Sherlock Holmes. Specifically Sherlock Holmes from the BBC show. And why I think he's actually a very good example of an autistic adult. So the autistic community has kind of just adopted Sherlock as like one of us, because he is one of us. But we don't usually talk about why. And there's the obvious things like he has a big IQ, which isn't always a thing with autism, but it can be. He's not very good at social cues whatsoever. His perceived low empathy, I'm using quotations, you can't see that, which actually isn't low empathy. It's, well, in my opinion, he doesn't have low empathy. He has different empathy, similar to how a lot of autistic people experience it, including myself. But to others, it's perceived as not really giving a shit about anything or other humans. But I want to talk about in this video Sherlock Holmes being autistic and Moriarty, and the way that they're both autistic, but they grew up in different ways and they have different lives, and that affects how they experience it. Because I never see people talking about how Moriarty is autistic, and it's so plain as fucking day to me. So first of all, let's start with Sherlock. Sherlock is really bad with social cues. A good example is when Moriarty was pretending to be a regular guy and was pretending to be dating Molly Hooper, and he just tells her straight up that he is gay, and doesn't think of whether or not that was a nice thing to do or any of that. He just comes straight to the point of telling her the honest truth. Yeah. And overall, I think that was nicer to do, but that isn't a usual behavior. It's a very autistic behavior. He stims quite a lot. I can put up some examples of Sherlock stimming. There is many. And I think one of the biggest things is his hyperfixation of detective work, and murderers specifically. He is big hyperfixation into crimes. And solving crimes, like puzzles and such. And that's been such a huge part of his life that he's made it his life goal and his job. And also this is a thing to do with his intelligence, where I feel like a lot of times people treat Sherlock, at least in the BBC show, that he is like way smarter than everyone else and all these things, but in reality he's not actually that more intelligent than other people. He is just very good at the specific thing that he does, and I would think that he's pretty intelligent, but I don't think he's an omnipotent god or something. He's still a human being, and I think specifically the reason people act this way towards him is because he's autistic. And very intelligent. Yeah. What else about Sherlock? Being autistic. This is not scripted. This is just me spouting my words that I feel the need to say. Sherlock is very honest, as I said. There's many cases of him just saying the outright truth and not caring to lie. But when he does need to lie, he's incredibly good. He doesn't mask often, but he's probably very good at it if he needs to. And he can just switch up on a dime into lying, which I think is a very autistic behavior of, not often lying or not wanting to lie, but when you need to, you're incredibly good at it. Yeah. So that's a little bit about Sherlock being autistic. There's so many reasons as to why he is, but yeah. And the way that his life has affected this is his family kind of they never treated him any different, really, for being autistic. I think Mycroft probably, he bullies him a little bit for his being emotional and stuff like that, but it's not overly bad. And he felt different as a kid, but because he had Mycroft in his life, who was also very intelligent, he didn't feel that different. And he was always kind of accepted, you know? He has a difficult time with empathy and forming relationships, but as we see in the show, he gains relationships fairly quickly, and people just like to be around him sometimes. Even though, like, people don't want to be around him, but they do, because he's Sherlock, and he's Sherlock. People are very interested in Sherlock, even though he's kind of an asshole. Yeah. And a good example of this is John. Like, he has a support network, is kind of what I'm getting at, is he has his brother, he has supportive parents, he has John, he has Lestrade. So he has a lot of people in his life who look out for him and things like this. Oh, I just forgot another thing I wanted to mention about him. His drug use. It's extremely common for autistic adults to be drug addicts, because it's a way of coping and self-soothing when we can't get medication for specific things like PTSD. That is also extremely common in being autistic. We can't cope in the regular ways that we want to cope, so we cope with drugs. And he has a drug problem. But even with that, he has people around him all the time, like Molly Hooper and Lestrade and John, who want to help him with his drug problem and get him out of his drug problem. So, contrasting that with Moriarty, who I believe he has specific mental disabilities as other than autism, like mental illness. But if we're just specifically talking about his autism, he basically has zero support in any of his disabilities, but especially in his autism. We don't know much about his life, but he probably had a messed up childhood. It would make sense. Or at least he doesn't speak to his family or his supposed brother. Yeah, he has basically no friends that we can see. I mean, it's hinted at that he has Sebastian, but we don't know how close he is to Sebastian Moran or any of that because he wasn't shown in the BBC show. So if I'm just going off what I see in the BBC show, he doesn't have a support network. He is not in any medical system or in societal system at all. He doesn't seem to be on any medications for his mental disabilities. Besides, maybe he takes recreational drugs and stuff like Sherlock does. But yeah, doesn't seem like he has anything prescribed. Which, because of that, leads him to be erratic and much less able to function like Sherlock does. We see him stimming constantly. I mean, he's like, even just his speech patterns, he goes from being like all sing-songy to being very direct, and he has issues controlling his volume and the emotion on his face. A good example is in the pool scene where he goes, I will burn you. I will burn the heart out of you. And you can see in his face he's trying to hide his emotion. And that's just very good acting on Andrew Scott's part. But yeah, if we take that as the character, because he was acting as that character, he can't hide his emotions very well, even when he's trying to be very serious and threatening. You can tell in his eyes he is a bit uncomfortable, or like he's trying to hide some emotions of his. I'm not going to get into all of the complexities of Moriarty's character, but if you know about his complexities, if you've read a Sherlock Studies blog, which I'll leave in the description, it's a beautiful like a way of seeing him. I don't agree with everything in it, but it's a good character study of Moriarty from the BBC show. So, yes. And I guess that's also in Sherlock, with Sherlock Holmes, you can see his, the way that he speaks is also very autistic, but it's not as obvious as it is with Moriarty. Moriarty is more, he seems more extroverted, but I can kind of tell whether this was just how Andrew Scott made him act, or it was written, or anything. He's very scripted in everything that he does. Like, he had a clear plan when it comes to things. When he came to the pool scene, to The Reichenbach Falls, to all of that, he planned it all very melodically. But he's also very impulsive, and he plans for his impulsiveness because he knows how impulsive it can be. Yeah. More examples of him stimming I can just show there, because he does it all of the fucking time. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I did. Just so.
I have loved this little game of ours, playing Jim from IT, playing gay. Did you like the little touch with the underwear?
That's what people do!
And also, he also has similar low empathy, but it doesn't seem like he has zero empathy. A good example is he didn't kill Molly Hooper. Why did he not kill Molly Hooper? I do not know. It's never explained, but in my opinion, it seems as he liked her as a friend, even if he's gay and he doesn't like women, and he didn't feel like killing her. Or, he felt a little bit of empathy with that. Very sweet, yes. And also, whether or not you believe he's in love with Sherlock, he feels some sort of emotion drawing him to Sherlock, and desperation, which is the reason why he does all of these impulsive things. He feels sadness in his suicidality and just doing random bullshit because he was bored and he's bored with life. That's an emotion. So he's a very emotional character. And it's kind of the opposite side of where Sherlock is very unemotional, and the classic example of a autistic person who doesn't show their emotions. They seem like they have no emotions. They're very robotic. But secretly they do have quite a lot of emotions. Moriarty he literally cannot hold in his emotions. They're too strong, and he doesn't know how to deal with any of them, and he doesn't know how to be a regular human being like that. So it's the two opposite sides of the spectrum in regards to emotions with autistic people. Yeah. There's probably more I could talk about. Might make a part 2 if I remember what I wanted to talk about, but regardless, that's like a good head start as to the man being autistic. So yeah, I never see people talking about it, and I think it's a very important thing to talk about, because they're good representation of autistic adults and what it's like to be an autistic adult, and all the different pathways that their lives can go down, because most people only talk about autistic adolescents and children, and never talk about what happens when you grow up, because we grow up. Yeah. We don't all stay teenagers and children for the rest of our lives.